Good evening, everyone. Welcome. For those of you who are visitors to our parish, I'm Father Anthony Saroki. I'm the pastor of the parish here. Tonight, this event we've decided to do it a little bit more in terms of a conversation where I'll be asking Steve and Brady some questions. He's going to do most of the talking, but it'll give a little more of a back and forth to it. And at the end, also, you'll be able to ask questions as well. And just a little bit of a background. So. The genesis for this event was that Mr. Brady was involved in a lawsuit. He was sued by former Monsignor Craig Harrison for defamation, and one of our parishioners of Paul Jonah of Lamandry and Jonah represented him successfully, and the lawsuit was dismissed. And so Paul was having Stephen come over, and they were celebrating that victory, and we decided we could also have a chance to hear from him. So that's why we're doing this. So I'm just going to do a real brief biography, and then I'm going to ask you some questions, Stephen, as we... Okay, so we're going to just kind of sit here, kind of a little at an angle, and I'll ask him questions, and he'll look at me, and then he'll probably turn to you and look at you as he's answering them in more depth. So he is the founder, and I guess is it president of Roman Catholic Faithful. Started in 1994 in Petersburg, Illinois. And for a number of years, he has been, and you can go on their website to their mission statement, he has been working to help hold church leaders accountable so that they can be faithful to the mission that Christ has entrusted to them in terms of fidelity to doctrine and fidelity to moral life. And it's been quite a journey for him, as you're about to hear. So if you don't mind taking a seat over here,
okay.
We're going to start. And so we had dinner last night, by the way. So there was, I could start, for where you were born and where you were raised and all that stuff. But instead, I would like to start with, you told me that when you were in your 20s, you had an experience where you became, serious about your Catholic faith.
Right. I was just out of the service. And Father Stanley Switek in Petersburg, Illinois, got a hold of me. He saw something in me. And he was giving me instructions one night a week for a year. And he pulled me out of the communion line. And he said, Stephen, you'll come to communion till you straighten out a few things in your life. And he later on explained things to me. He saw something in me. And what he did started the process that led me here tonight. He said, Stephen, I'm not here to make friends, I'm here to save souls. He taught me the meaning of love. He made me mad when he pulled me out of the communion line, but once he taught me the value of each and every human soul, that man loved me enough to punch me in the nose, figuratively, to get me on the right path. Because I'd just come out of the army, I wasn't a very good practicing Catholic, and in fact, the first newspaper article I did, I referred to myself as once the world's biggest heathen. My wife says, why would you say something like that? I said, after that, honey, what can they say about me? So it started the ball rolling, and it brought me 20 years later.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about that because there's a lot of people today that say you should never deny communion to someone, that it's all are welcome, and the Eucharist is a medicine for sinners, not a reward of saints. Well, but you shared an experience where this really helped you, though.
Well, that's how, in my opinion, it's been so misused and abused. For example, a cardinal that gives communion to a pro-abortion politician, he can't love Christ, or he can't believe in the real presence, or he can't believe in the four last things, because as this good priest taught me, like the priest you've got here, he grabbed me by the collar. And he made it clear, I understood the value of each and every human soul. And mine he was concerned about. And I thank God every day for him doing that. And it started the process that made me the man I am, partially my father, that brought me here today. So.
And he accompanied you, really, right? Because you said he personally instructed you for a year?
For a year, he met with me. Father did his own church bulletin. He did his own payroll. He taught the religion in the high school. And it was really amazing. I would meet with him one night a week, and he set me straight. He made me mad, he hurt my feelings, but he saved my soul. And it was that foundation, when this other stuff started coming up, I just couldn't let it go.
So let's talk about some of that other stuff. So My understanding is actually it was something that was happening in public schools
Right.
that started this whole process that led to the founding of Roman Catholic Faith. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
I first met the woman of my dreams, and I asked Father, because he knew everybody in town. I moved to that town after I got out of the Army. I'd worked up around Gary, Indiana. I was drafted out of Gary, Indiana, dropped out of Purdue. And I said, Father, can I marry this girl? He said, yeah, she's a keeper. She was a Methodist, but she converted. She's a better Catholic than I am. Right now, I've got 7 children. 1 passed away, unfortunately, and I'm about to have the 17th grandchild. So I've been blessed. But when my oldest was 14, back around middle 1990s, the public school, had a horrific sex education program. And so don't get discouraged, because fighting for the faith has made my faith so much stronger. I'm standing all alone most of the time. I suffer absolute loneliness. But Christ, a devotion to the Blessed Mother helps, and it brought me to the realization of how perfect and true God's teaching in his church is. The sex education program was pornographic in the public schools. The problem is, the teacher that brought in Planned Parenthood to the public school was my son's religion teacher at the parish.
So this is the public school teacher.
Public school
brought
teacher
in
who was a
Planned
Catholic.
Parenthood, and you guys knew her because she was also teaching.
She was
religion
also
in the
my
parish.
son's religion teacher at the parish, and I sat in on the Planned Parenthood class. By then, I already had a reputation, and the first thing, they had guards next to me, and I said, I'm standing in, you're teaching my kids, and
Were you guys given any notice? How did you find out about this? Did the school give you notice about what was
after
going to happen?
I found out what they were teaching in the class, but they taught the young ladies how to keep from getting pregnant and satisfy the young men. But it was so disgusting, and I'm thinking of my 7 children, especially my girls. But understand something, and it's going on yet today, and much of the hierarchy is involved, the corrupt end of it, not the good end of it. They're destroying a sense of shame, a sense of innocence. Planned Parenthood, the first thing they did was tell these kids, you don't need your parents' permission to come see us or get birth control. So right off the bat, they undermined parental authority. And that, with the sex education, the school board members were a majority Catholic in this public school. They were extraordinary ministers. I went before the school board many times. So Planned Parenthood had to go. I hadn't got into the church problems yet, so I put up a billboard. It's the way I think. I bought a lot across from the courthouse, and I put up a billboard. I did work for the bank, construction work. I got the lot repossessed. I got it for what they owed on it, no money down. I put up a billboard that read, and this is key: Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion provider, has been allowed to teach in our high school. If they cannot abort our children, the least we can do is let them educate the ones they missed.
Wow.
You
So
see,
where was this put up?
right up across from the courthouse in town on a big billboard.
So people walking by,
Oh,
driving
they
by
hated it.
every
The
day.
mayor came to me, the lawyers said it was putrid. I said, yeah, but it's true, and it's not libelous. But you see what that did? It brought that child, aborted child, to comparison to a born child. And it was killing them. And finally, one night, a city alderman was caught cutting it down. The police officer that arrested him was on probation to this officer.
So you didn't make a lot of friends in this town.
No, we lost 20% of our pizza place business at the time.
So at the time, you were a small businessman running a pizza place.
I had a little construction business, but mainly we had this little pizza place I bought from a Sicilian family, and I bought the building and rented to them, then my wife took it over. But what happened was the alderman cut it down. They called me at 2 in the morning, Sunday morning, said, Brady, you got to come in. Somebody cut your sign down. I was halfway laughing. I thought a bunch of kids. And he said, we're going to let him go if you don't come in here right now. I said, listen, I was federally trained. He's got to go before a judge. He's got to be arraigned, and you've got to set bond. So don't tell me no, if you don't come in now, we're going to drop it. Well, when I got in there, I found out they had a judge up already. It was a Catholic judge. This thing was discussed beforehand, set up by the city council. One of the people told me it was discussed at the Christmas party, and it was cut and dry. And it brought so much publicity because in the courtroom, I told the judge, because it was a felony because of the cost of the sign. I told the judge, Your Honor, his family suffered enough. If he'll resign from the council and pay for restitution, I'll put that sign back up. The sign stays up till Planned Parenthood goes. They took it out of Planned Parenthood. I said, I want to drop it to a misdemeanor so he doesn't pay the rest of his life. Because he went to the place he worked, the power company, and took their chainsaw to cut the sign down.
So
it compounded everything.
Okay, so you're getting, you're raising awareness, obviously,
right,
and getting opposition. So did it change what was being taught in the schools? And how does this lead you to the Catholic Church? Because you're working in the public school.
They kicked Planned Parenthood out.
Okay.
I gave lectures on the pornographic sex education in every Protestant church. Not one Catholic church would let me in. And anyway, so the sign being cut down, my court case was publicized. James Dobson, Focus on the Family, contacted me. They wrote up an article about it. They put me on radio stations across the country. My wife said I got a tape saying, little old lady sent me money. They were younger than I am now. But they sent me money for a pro-life cause. I had to do something with this money. But in the meantime, I had written every priest in the diocese, why won't the local priest or the bishop stop this? It's such a scandal. It's the murder of children, the destruction of innocence. And one priest, most of the priests wrote me back, Yama, you're an idiot, pre-Vatican II nut, or some such thing. But one or two priests wrote me back and said, Stephen, don't you know? The bishop is a homosexual picking up kids off the street. You see, I'm my father's son, and you tell me that, and it's like if my neighbor's beating his wife, I'm not going to let it go.
Wait, when you first heard that, what did you think? Did you think?
I thought, my first thought was, I'll get the information I need. I was trained as a federal officer in a limited basis years earlier, and I said, I can't let this go. I'm not going to let this go. I have to find out if it's true. And people started sending me money because of the Focus on the Family. They thought I was a pro-life leader. So I formed a corporation called Roman Catholic Faithful so I could account for IRS to the money, but also start investigating what I'd been told. And I started questioning priests, and I come up with information. Police officers knew the bishop was picking up teenage boys off the street.
So, but let me go back. So, you hear this about the bishop. This is the bishop at what diocese?
Bishop Daniel Ryan. It's all been public many times, yeah.
And you made this connection, or was told to you that he's not speaking up about what's happening in the public schools.
Right.
And there are Catholic parishioners and extraordinary ministers that are involved
violating church law. They're committing mortal sin. Yeah.
You made the connection that he wasn't speaking out against it because also what he was doing is private.
Right. That's what the priest made the connection that contacted me. But so at that point, Roman Catholic Faithful was formed. 3 ladies from the diocese, not locally, they wanted to help me. So they licked the stamps. That's before they had sticky stamps, and licked the envelopes, and we started mimeographing a newsletter with faith. In my mind, I'll get the information and I'll send it to the Pope and Cardinal Bernardine in Chicago, and then they'll solve it. Little did I know. Little did I know. So then I held some press conferences, and the Vatican got involved. Cardinal Bernardine said he wanted nothing to do with it.
What was at these press conferences?
I held press conferences about the sex education and what I'd learned about Bishop Ryan, because I had firsthand testimony from some of the priests. And I don't want to destroy anybody. I don't want to go to hell for disparaging somebody that was innocent. And so I held a press conference. I said, somebody's got to listen. And they were the papers, the Catholic paper, oh, he's a wacko, he's a pre-Vatican II nut. I got death threats in the mail also. So one night, about midnight, I'm wondering, dear Lord, what have I got to do? Well, one night about midnight, I got a phone call from Sandra. She was a young woman who was abused herself as a child in state homes. She said, Mr. Brady, they're calling you a liar, and I know you're not a liar. I've been on the street for a long time, and I've been with some of these boys who've been selling themselves to the bishop. I know their names. I said, so I asked my wife, honey, can I go to the wrong side of the town, pick up a street lady, and take her for an interview? And she said yes. So I did that. And Sandra carried around with her the imitation of Christ. Think about this. Of all the people in the world, a woman from the street was the only place I could get an answer, to get the help. She gave me the names of about 4 or 5 young men. I found them. 3 or 4 of them were in different Illinois prisons for petty crimes. Bad checks. But there's something that woke me up and damn near brought me to tears. I went to see one of them. Being an Illinois inmate, you can't communicate with one another. So I knew if I got the same statement from the ones incarcerated and the ones not incarcerated, I know I would have the truth. But I was still young and naive and thinking the hierarchy was going to solve it. So I found Frank Bergen in a prison in Jacksonville. He was adopted out of an abusive home in St. Louis, put into a home, and he was running away from home as a young teen, living on the street, selling himself to Bishop Ryan and some of the clergy to survive on the street. He wasn't a homosexual per se. When I met the guy, he was a young man, he had AIDS. And he'd also been trafficked to Chicago, and that's a whole other issue with political stuff I got into. But anyway, I'm in this prison cafeteria talking to Frank, and he brought me to tears and to my knees. He said something to me that made me feel ashamed of myself. He said, "Mr. Brady," he told me a story. He said, "I ran away from home for the last time at 15. I prayed my mother would come give me one more time, and she never came. But, excuse me, that you see them kids sitting there, and then you see what this does. And I'm no pushover. When it came to these children, and it reminded me of my children, so I'm taking Sandra, I found several of the others, and I was interviewing them. So I was driving Sandra to see a priest. These were all Catholic kids. The very people that should have been helping them were destroying them and dragging them down. And there's no way I'm letting this stay, period. So I'm taking Sandra, the girl who came to me, the young woman, to see a priest. And I look over her at the car and she's crying. I said, "Sandra, what's wrong?" She said, "Mr. Brady, are you using me?" I said, "No, Sandra, not like you mean." I said, "But I need your help, and I need what you know and your knowledge." But again, it brought to mind reality, what these kids are going through, and the very institution that should be helping them. So about this time, Father, I'm printing a newsletter up, mimeographing it, holding more press conferences. Father John Harden, a holy priest, calls me from Detroit. "I want you to work with me." So I go up, take my family up to Assumption Grotto Parish in Detroit. Father Harden, he gives me the address and phone number of Father Alfred Kuntz. He wants Father Kuntz to give me direction. He's a canon lawyer. By the way, on March 5th, 1998, Father Alfred Kuntz, while he was helping me, was found brutally murdered. His throat was cut. It still hasn't been solved yet today. But anyway, Father Harden told me it was church connected. So the Vatican then sent Father Harden to talk to me and our board members, and I picked him up at the airport in St. Louis. Father Harden told me, he said, "Stephen, he said, obedience isn't a vow with me, it's a way of life. And I've been ordered to do everything I can to convince you to keep your mouth shut by the Vatican. So that's what I'm here for." But then he got me and my attorney aside, and he said, "Stephen, my orders are to convince you to be quiet. That's what I'm going to try and do. But personally, don't you ever stop what you're doing," he told me. Then I get a phone call from Cardinal George in Chicago. Bernardine's dead. He wanted nothing to do with this. Cardinal George took over.
What time is this around now when you...
96, 97. Cardinal Bernardine had just died. So it was late 97, early 98. And Cardinal George called me. He was the Metropolitan. And he said, "Stephen, if you go public with this press conference, you'll be stuck with Ryan. The Vatican won't deal through the press." I said, "You mean, Your Eminence, rather than face embarrassment, you will leave this bishop in power to rape children and destroy souls? Do you fear God?" He wouldn't answer me, so I hung up on him. I told him, "Go fly a kite," and left it at that. Finally, all this came about, and Bishop George Lucas, Ryan, retired. And I'm thinking, dear Lord, why isn't he being removed?
When he retired, so he retired, there was no canonical investigation?
Nothing. They completely ignoring me.
Was there any civil lawsuits?
Nothing. Well, the diocese did get sued for the abuse. It was a McCormick lawsuit, abuse of several other children. The two lawyers that handled the case, Stephen Rubino and Fred Nessler, it's public, so I can say that, I fed them information that they've got a $3 million judgment against the diocese, but not for what Ryan did, for what he allowed to do with other priests.
So that was for a lack of neglect in supervising priests.
Right.
But for his own actions, was he
nothing.
Ever, was
nothing
there,
at this
was there ever
point.
Any criminal investigation?
Nothing.
No civil lawsuit?
I found out the police knew about it. But when Ryan retired, they moved him into a home right there in the diocese, near one of the parishes. The diocese owned it. They moved Bishop Ryan in there, retired. But he still did mass confirmations. Bishop George Lucas came in, who's now Archbishop.
But I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
Ryan never admitted to any of this.
Nothing.
He denied it, and he's since passed away.
He did admit to it finally. Well, it came an investigation when Bishop George Lucas come in. I'll explain why. But when George Lucas came in, he called me in, Ryan retired, and the first thing George Lucas said, your family will never be welcome at any parish in this diocese unless you disband Roman Catholic faithful. So he didn't tell me where I was wrong. He just said, your family is not welcome in the church unless you shut your mouth and stop what you're doing. And he said, you know what you do is dangerous, don't you? I took that as a threat. But then, they thought I was going to go away. So I kept digging. There was a police report regarding Bishop Daniel Ryan's home. And I got a lawyer to get it for me, because in Illinois you can get police reports, but everything was redacted. It was a domestic disturbance. Now I'm thinking, a bishop living alone, what kind of domestic disturbance could there be? Well, I went to Catholic Charities, the Breadline. I found the name of the individual that was redacted, and I went public. It's posted in our newsletters. He gave me permission to use his name. It was Timothy Hugo, a young man who was a homosexual. And it was a sad story. Timothy Hugo went over to the bishop's house because the bishop had stole his boyfriend. Timothy Hugo used to be Bishop Ryan's boyfriend. I took him out to dinner with his current boyfriend. So I took that police report and I made it so public. And I talked to the neighbor who interviewed Timothy. He ran out of the house crying because Ryan tried to sexually assault him. His current boyfriend was there at Bishop Ryan's home. And then I interviewed Timothy. I got some of the bishop's belongings that Timothy had when they were boyfriends. I found out so much information from Timothy, and I knew I had the truth because I had so many different firsthand testimonies. So now, Bishop Lucas, the Vatican, they were forced to do an investigation. They hired a former federal prosecutor to investigate. I went, and I had 500 pages of documents by now, statements. Illinois Attorney General wanted them, and I gave them to him. So, long story short, they found out that there was a problem with Bishop Ryan. He was sexually active. He did make an environment that wasn't conducive to holy priest, and they slapped his wrist and put him in a nursing home somewhere else. But the stuff went on. The homosexual clergy that were still around him and protecting him, I had firsthand testimony on. They were left in power. It was a cover-up. By now I knew I got a job cut out before me.
So let me just see if I'm understanding. So that there was a number of other priests that were involved in this, in this kind of activity.
There was one priest,
and they had positions in the
chancery.
The chancery.
One felon came to me, a young man, Hispanic young man, who took part in some of the Spanish masses at one of the parishes. He came to me and said, Mr. Brady, they're going to try to do something because I know what they're doing. He was working with a lot of the priests and the bishop. Thomas Munoz was his name. It's all public record. He knows I'm using his name. He's back in prison right now for some theft issues. But anyway, I'm not talking about the panhandlers now, but when you talk to these kids, I used to spit on, figuratively speaking. I felt so ashamed of myself when you hear their stories and you hear what they've been through. But Thomas Munoz, right about this time, the chancellor of the diocese, Father Costa, this is in the newspaper, was beaten in Douglas Park one night about 2 in the morning. It was 30 degrees out. He said he was just going for a walk, and they blamed Thomas Munoz, the guy that gave me an interview, for the beating. Thomas Munoz was on parole. He was afraid they were going to do something, so his parole was automatically revoked because of the allegation. It was later found out that Father Costa, the chancellor, was trying to pick up 2 teenage boys, and they beat him up. He made sexual advances to them. And then the vicar general, I found his name through a phone call in an Illinois Labor Board complaint that he cost somebody his job because he put down his sexual advances. And two of the people that knew what Ryan was doing are big shot bishops right now in this country. I'm not going to name them. You may learn about them sooner or later. But anyway, so at this point, I'm beating the doors down of the press. The press won't cover it. I've lost, people hate me. I got a threat that the FBI looked into. They said I was marked for assassination. A real estate agent in New York sent me, he got an email from somebody, I'm marked for assassination. Well, the FBI contacted me, they tracked it down. It turned out to be a threat from a priest I investigated who came over from England, who was abusing children over there, learned the traditional mass, and came to this country. He was in Florida. I'm not going to mention his name. He's dead now, and it's all documented, but still. So now the phone starts ringing. I get calls from Ireland, South America, Italy, Australia. They want my help. Ireland.
They want your help for what?
Investigating, or what do I do?
Okay, so sorry, let me just...
No, go ahead, Father. I'm sorry. I'm long-winded, so I apologize.
So, so they're learning about you through the media, and they're calling you. Now, is it because they don't feel they can go to church authorities, they don't feel they can go to civil authorities? Is it, well, my sense is that there's people who have been either themselves victimized or know someone who's been victimized, and they don't feel there's other avenues for them to...
They didn't trust the church hierarchy. Right. They've been reading about my story. The Wanderer, a few Catholic newspapers in this state covered it. I think Mr. Holman's one of his newspapers. And I put out a newsletter. I'll tell you what I did at Bishop Ryan. And this will give you an idea. Besides writing I made up a postcard with a picture of me and two ladies holding a protest sign. It was a color postcard. The protest sign, Bishop Ryan is having sex with priests and teenage boys.
Wow.
So I took that postcard, I mailed it to every Boy Scout troop, every Girl Scout troop, every city council member.
Now, was there any doubt in your mind this was true?
No.
And you were ready because he could have sued you for
I
defamation?
wouldn't have done it had I not believed it, because I didn't want to go to hell for destroying somebody. But when a young man, a dozen of them, and the priest, will tell you the size and shape of his anatomy, his freckles, what ATM he uses, so on and so forth. And believe me, I was convinced I had the truth. And they would never want to give me the right to discovery and get their travel records.
So you're publicizing this, and what is your hope with that? What's your objective in that? That he would just be forced to resign because of shame? Or that...
I wanted to force the hierarchy because I still had a little bit of hope. There was some goodness there, somebody in the hierarchy. But I was slowly but surely learning it was no such thing. But then I get a phone call from Jenny Galloway. And this is public. She's got a case. Jenny Galloway, because this is crucial to forming this mind. She was a 12-year-old girl when she ran away from home. Her mother was in a mental institution. Her father was not in the picture. She was gang raped at the old age of 12. She was an overdeveloped girl. I didn't know her then. She came to me much later. And anyway, a priest picked her up at the train station, a priest from the Springfield Diocese where I was working. And she wanted help because he impregnated her twice. One of the boys had a medical condition. She wanted to get the medical records of the priest that impregnated her from the diocese, Bishop Lucas. And she finally tried to sue him, and he wouldn't cooperate. But
so this is years after the incident happened. She has children from this.
And she comes to me because of my notoriety. And it's just like the Irish group that contacted me. I said, why? Because we know you care. And we know you'll do something even if it isn't successful. They wanted somebody to lead them, something to hope, something to live for. And I said, stay in the faith, keep your faith strong. But Jenny, this priest, and then the doctor, this is the kicker. The doctor that was her OBGYN was doing the same thing to her. And I said, Jenny, why didn't you leave this priest when you became 15 or 16? This is key. She said, Mr. Brady, I thought that's what love was. Imagine a girl whose mother's in a psych ward, was gang raped at 12, and a man of God takes her in. I will not tell you what he did to her. Her doctor was involved. He was doing the same thing to her and told her she had a cancer, which she didn't, and took her the hysterectomy, because he was having her way with her with a lot of other doctors. So I got the statements from the state police. They investigated this doctor. He was prescribing Valium and opioids to her, and I about hit the floor. The doctor was my wife's OBGYN. The good Lord, in his own way, is showing me everything. And
so wait, what do you mean by that? You felt like you're like things are opening up for you, connections are being made.
With the destruction of the innocence of the children, it showed me the value and the truth of the church teaching.
You are getting this out about Bishop Ryan, and then there's another bishop that came in, and he told you you're not welcome in the diocese.
Right.
Okay. And so you're getting calls from Ireland, you're getting calls from around the world. You're trying to interview people. You're meeting these victims and things like that. What was the next major development?
A call came in that would change my way of thinking forever. And the corruption is not about homosexuality or rape. It's about power and money. And everything that flows from the corruption of power and money is sex, rape, drugs. It all flows from that. I got a phone call from a religious person. Cliff Renard, he's dead now. He lived in California. I think it was Bakersfield. No, it wasn't Bakersfield. It might have been Bakersfield. But anyway, he introduced me to an organization on the internet called St. Sebastian's Angels. You can search that on the internet. St. Sebastian's Angels, Stephen Brady. It's still being used worldwide.
Maybe they shouldn't search it on the internet.
Well, that's true.
So,
but
so this is just to give them a little background.
A little head up, yeah.
This is a website in which gay men basically...
Only clergy.
Oh.
You had to be a priest in the Kennedy Directory. Bishops and priests joined this group, and it was a network of homosexual clergy that shared pictures, most of it inappropriate pictures I can't discuss. And they shared emails, their thoughts on this one, on that one.
Sorry, so how would they screen for that? How would someone be able to join?
You couldn't get in unless they let you in. You didn't have the address to the site.
So some kind of site administrator?
Yes. I could see the site because I had the address. But it's not an address you could search or find, and nobody would think to. It was on a priest's private site. But you couldn't access all their emails unless you were brought into the group. But this religious brother was so offended. He sent me everything. When they'd send out a batch of emails, he sent them to me. I read hundreds of emails between homosexual clergy who thought it was all private, and there's nothing more educational than reading 1,000 emails between
So when you got this, you realized this is not just a couple priests here and there, but there's a significant number.
Right. But the reason I couldn't let it go, they were talking about youth directors. They were talking about hearing confessions. I thought of my 7 kids. And one priest sent a picture of himself with a 12-year-old boy down in Mexico. He called his tour guide, but he's not my current lover. The FBI wanted that, but I offered this. I had photographs, nude photographs. I had hundreds of emails. Every cardinal in this country, I offered it to him, from Mahoney on to O'Connor and everybody. I said, somebody has to do something. Is there any faith left?
Let me ask you this, though. You're finding this information. Are these priests interacting anonymously, or can you actually connect with them?
No, I tracked them down. At this point, I had friends in the feds, and I had internet people that knew all this stuff. I contacted some of them.
So
I verified.
You were able to find out
Yes.
the identity, the actual identity. So, and you wanted to share this with some of the
hierarchy,
because you're hoping then that they would investigate it themselves.
Take care of it.
Yeah.
Because this was a cancer that was eating away. Because my children, not my children, but your children, everybody's children were being affected by this. Not one cardinal wanted
response?
it.
Not a
single. So I called Cardinal George. I still had his cell phone number. I said, Your Eminence, why won't you take this information and do something with it? His exact words to me were, Stephen, it may be a near occasion of sin for me to look at it. I said, how do you hear confessions? There's no women in this. It's all men. how do you go to the YMCA? I said, I can leave out certain pictures if you want, but you got to read these emails. And I hung up on him because nothing. There was one person that was interested. That was Cardinal Ratzinger. He was still at the CDF because the one bishop involved there, Bishop Cockett from Cape Town, South Africa, this has been in the newspapers all over South Africa and this country. Washington Times covered it a lot. Ignatius Press, Father Fessio covered it a lot. And he was referring to Cardinal Ratzinger as the rat. And he was making all kind of comments about him. And I sent this to him. And I said, Cardinal Ratzinger called Cockett into his office. But see, what these priests and bishops didn't know, I was still monitoring the site. So, Cockett got on the internet telling all his buddies, yeah, this Brady got in here and hacked us, and now I got to go to Rome. He didn't realize I was still looking at all the stuff and getting all their emails. So when he went to Rome, he talked about Cardinal Ratzinger's Queen of the Secretary and all this stuff, and what they were going to do if they dare come out against homosexuals in the priesthood. But you had to realize the filth was not in the language, but in their destruction of the faith. And these guys were running parishes and hearing confessions. So he called up to Cardinal Ratzinger, and they had a meeting, but he came back on the site, and he started talking about what happened at the meeting, how the cardinal shunned him, and this happened, the other. So I went back to Cardinal Ratzinger. I said, just so you know I'm telling you the truth, here's what happened at your meeting. Here's what he said.
So he knew that you were.
He knew that I was truthful and honest.
You could only know it if he had written it and if you had access to it.
And that's when Ratzinger, he removed him as bishop. He's still a priest. He may be bishop again. But this was just the next step in mountains of information. And then you take that with Father Kuntz's murder and with what I learned about children. And it was just something I couldn't let go. But something more important in all of this. You know how I know the hierarchy is corrupt? First of all, if they don't enter my opinion, I'm not going to mention names, if they don't enter the hierarchy with a true love for Christ and his church and belief in the four last things, they must be part of a criminal enterprise. Because you know why? When Cardinal McCarrick was removed, Bishop Ryan was removed, nobody loved them enough, like Father Switek loved me, to stop them, save their soul, straighten them out. Do you see any prayers being offered for these pervert priests and bishops that are being protected? Father Switek showed me what true love is. And sometimes, if you can say, he talked about a man whose wife was being, sometimes you got to break their nose to save their soul. And he was literal in that treaty. But he taught me what it was, a good priest like you've got here, what it was to love a fellow man. No one loved these perverts. I felt sorry for them. Priests came to me who were being coerced into sexual relationships with their bishops.
I think it was 2002 in the Boston Globe.
Right.
Started writing these articles on what was happening in the Archdiocese of Boston regarding priests that had abused minors. And over the next several years, the bishops met and they developed this protocol, which was to protect minors, basically, and what happens if a priest is accused and things like that. So this is after some of the work you've done. So you got an awareness of this beforehand. It seems like, at least in terms of the reporting that happens now, that the abuse of minors is much, much less than it was in the past.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the I don't know what is really happening in terms of priests being unfaithful to their vows of celibacy with adults. And is that something that you think is still?
Oh, absolutely.
Happening?
And I was in 2002. I was in Dallas. A Catholic group and Catholic citizens in Chicago paid my way down there, and I was there at the bishops' meeting. I did several radio shows.
So you're not confident in what in the Dallas Charter and all that was done there, because a lot of the people involved in formulating those policies didn't have their hands clean. They themselves were involved in things.
This was a smokescreen. Who needs to spend $5 million on meetings to discuss how to stop priests from raping children, period. But you look at all the cover-ups and all the payoffs, and it just escalated. And the good Lord, for whatever reason, and I don't hear voices, don't get me wrong, but I pray a lot and got a devotion to the Blessed Mother, but things were shown to me. You understand the church's teachings and the beauty of the family. But what I'm telling you is I've learned so much about the beauty of the family and the destruction of the family by what they're doing. And birth control and abortion. Can you imagine a man of God? The greatest evil ever committed is that evil committed by a man who claims to represent Christ. And if a man who claims to represent Christ promotes sacrilege, he either hates the Lord or doesn't believe in it. How can a man who claims to be a descendant of the apostles do such things? And you know who I'm talking about. I don't need to tell you. And the same thing with birth control, ladies. It's an assault against you if some bishop or priest suggests birth control because he's telling you women are tramps to be used by men, period. But things sort of developed on from there. And the fact that no one ever prayed for these priests and bishops showed me the real evil of this because they didn't care. I had priests come to me, homosexual priests, that were being used. But then I got a phone call from Jordan. And that's a whole other issue.
Phone call from who?
Jordan, a Jordanian. And he was going to be here tonight. Because I'd already found...
Sorry, who's Jordan?
Jordanian, the story. The country, Jordanian.
Oh, you got a call from the country of Jordan.
Yeah, well, an individual from Jordan.
So before we get in that, because that's recent.
Yeah.
So what do you feel... Do you feel that your work in publicizing this, in protesting, in investigating, do you feel how has it positively impacted the church?
First of all, if you've got a child, I would hate myself if something happened to one of your children because I didn't tell you what was going on.
So let me just...
The murder of the soul is the biggest thing.
So at least on one level... By making these things public, you were giving people warning and notice that this person was not safe to be around. Is that...
Well, or any priest that you're not comfortable with who doesn't promote Orthodox holy teaching.
So you don't have a grand strategy, and you're not even necessarily going to measure this by whether it leads to a disciplinary action or criminal action or civil action against someone who did some of these horrific things. But you feel like you have to just... You find out these bad things, you have to try to
if you do the circumstances that some of this stuff is laid before me, and I can't let it go, Father. If I knew somebody...
Well, why not just say, okay, let me bring it to the police, or let me bring it to...
And the police... I was asked to train investigators for a Wisconsin state's attorney, prosecutor. I said, why? Because you have a success rate. I felt I had to do something, and... in my own way, it was laid before me, and I'll trust in the good Lord to take it from there. And I've had a lot of good priests, like yourself, Father, come to me and give me direction. Father Hardin, Father Malachi Martin, Father Kuntz, Father Minkler, who's dead, Father O'Connor, a lot of good priests that came to me and suffered the consequences.
There was a time, too, where Roman Catholic faithful, the organization ceased to operate. So can you tell me kind of what...
That was about 2009. I've done so much, and people were less interested in what I was doing. And so I talked to my lawyer, our board members, well, let's cut it off for a while, and maybe the good Lord will take over, maybe it's meant to be. But a few years later, something else was dumped in my lap. It was the Pennsylvania grand jury and the McCarrick situation.
So that was in 2018 when that all came out.
Right, and I started back up. We did about 2018. IRS gave me my 501c3 back, and I said, people were still calling me. I said, I can't let this go. I said, I still got work to do. And I'm hoping, I don't hear voices, but I hope and pray the good Lord's dropping this stuff in my lap. But believe me, if you knew the judges, the prosecutors, the federal agents that come to me for help, when a federal agent comes to me and tells me about a problem within a federal agency, so I'll take care of it, there's a problem, with everything. And that's when it all started again, and I got involved. A few groups interviewed me. Michael Vorse from Church Militant put me on the news quite a bit, and that's when I found the $9 million building a group of bishops bought in Omaha.
So let's talk about some of the financial stuff, because you mentioned it before that there's money involved in some of this stuff.
Right.
So is this an example of a...
Well, I realized through all the work, because you're only getting the tip of the iceberg, what I know. And I started to think, this money's going somewhere, because there's a lot of money that's not accountable, billions of dollars. And World just got $1 million salary, was in the press, Cardinal World. So anyway, I thought, if they're not putting it in their name, they're doing something with it. So I did a background search. I picked a priest. I'm not going to tell you how I picked him, because I don't want them to be leery. You can also do relatives. There's no better source than a housekeeper, a cook, a maid, a driver from any bishop, I'm telling you. So I did a background search on a particular priest who was problematic but protected. Lo and behold, I find a corporation set up to raise money for a priest in several different dioceses. Well, one of the dioceses was my own diocese, Springfield. They already raised money for priests. And I got to dig in a little more, and I found this corporation set up by the bishops, legal corporation, not connected to any diocese. McCarrick was one of them, Lucas and a few others.
Sorry, what do you mean one of them? On the board of this corporation?
A bunch of bishops, cardinals, got together and set up a private corporation called CMG, Catholic Mutual Group, yeah. It was, you can search it. It was a self-insurance for the bishops. Except I talked to one bishop and he didn't know anything about it, a bishop I trust. Anyway, so I started doing the background on this corporation. They got a church status. So they don't have to report any money, but they claim to be a self-insurance agency. Then I found a $9 million building they bought in Omaha. Now, where do you think that $9 million came from?
Well, I'm sorry, what's the building? I don't understand.
Well, it was a building for their corporation. But bishops in this country own billions of dollars worth of real estate. Why did they need something in Omaha that's set up separate from any diocese? So I sent a young lady there. The doors were locked, she couldn't get in. So she asked for the chapel or the pastor. We don't have chapels, we don't have pastors. Oh. So you got a church standing, church deduction, you don't have to report any income, but you don't have a chapel and you don't have a church. So obviously you're getting help from somebody in the federal government. Then I started to find out they got chapters set up and corporations set up, legal corporations set up in different parts of the country.
So you're concerned that the way that it's structured, there isn't.
Yeah,
don't they have to? Aren't they audited? Or isn't there some kind of?
Because they're a church entity, you can't get their financial records. I got enough records from the Omaha Secretary of State. You can find out who's on the board each year, but I can't get their mission statement. I can't get any of their financial records. They're not required to report anything, and they don't have a single parish or a single pastor that they admitted to. My only concern is they're not connected to any diocese. So sure, they can provide insurance. They provide educational programs for protecting children and so on and so forth. But there's no accountability. You have no idea which diocese is sending money there and where it's going. There's no accountability. And separate from each diocese. So, I mean, the most you get from your bishop is a pie chart. And I did an interview about that very topic on Church Militant, and a Jordanian family saw it. And that's when they called me. And,
so why was a family from the country of Jordan calling you?
Well, the wife made the husband call me. They watched the video I did twice. They liked the way I said things, and I talked. And his wife, whom I spent a week with at their home here in California, and I met with him first with an FBI investigator, money laundering expert, Benjamin Senyani. It's a public case. I'll read you one paragraph from the case here. But he said, Stephen, I was employed. His cousin was the former Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. Most people don't know the Holy Land is under the guardianship of the Jordanian royal family. Most people don't know that. Anyway, I learned a lot. Benjamin was a developer. He'd take old hotels at the request of the Vatican or whomever, and hire new help, make them profitable again. And anyway, the Vatican, I know what he was being paid, hired him to take care of the AUM, the American University in Madaba, Jordan. And AUM is what it stands for. They wanted him to get the fleet of buses, the lab equipment, finish things up. And I confirmed that he was employed to do that job. I confirmed, I got the documents, that he did have power of attorney over the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. He was honored that they came to him and asked him to do such a thing. But then, according to Benjamin, he realized what they were doing, and he quit. They owed him like $33 million, and he quit. I'm not going to tell you why he quit. I'll read it to you from the court documents, just a little paragraph. And with the help of the Jordanian government, they took his bank accounts, several homes he had, all his vehicles in Jordan, and they called him a thief. And he said, Stephen, you don't understand, in the Holy Land, the people there are faith is all they have. And he says, if you're disparaged by a cardinal or a bishop, your family turns on you. And he said, so he filed a lawsuit for not being paid his bills, is what the lawsuit is about. There's a term for that, I can't remember. But not honoring the contract. But there was much more to it. So I went out there with a friend who was an investigator for the FBI on money laundering, and I met with him at a hotel. I said, the FBI individual, he wasn't an agent, but an investigator for them. He confirmed that, yeah, this sounds real, and I got 2,000 pages of documents, and there's 10,000 more pages. I met with his lawyer. I had dinner with his lawyer. I'd then come back to California, Ontario. I spent a couple of days with him and his family because I had to meet the wife. I could know if he's being honest with you if I met the wife. But I confirmed these other things, and I'll tell you why he quit, and I'll just read you. You can get all the paperwork. It's in the Court of State of California, County of San Bernardino. I want to read you one paragraph from the 2,000 pages that I have so far.
And this is the complaint?
Court documents that you can get yourself on court record. I'm just reading what's on the court documents.
Yeah, but this is the allegation of the plaintiff.
Right, this is the allegation of the plaintiff. And he said, this is his lawyer's language, Plaintiff Cerniani learned through this email from Father McDonough that he was being asked to participate in and initiate a massive money laundering scheme that involved all of the defendants. And
who are the defendants?
The Holy See, the Secretary of State, and the Latin Patriarch, and a dozen others. I can't pronounce their names. The request for funding would have resulted in a payment of $150 million that would be reflected as a charitable donation from an international oil company operating in the United States. The oil company would have been entitled to a charitable deduction from the IRS. I'm not going to stop there, and as far as this goes, and I'm going to tell you, it goes on and outlines everything. And one of the individuals, I'm not going to mention his name, who was accused of handling this money, is a California resident and a reporter from Church.
So that's why this is being filed in California.
Well, because Benjamin's businesses were in California, Indiana, and New Hampshire, but he lives here now. So this is history making, because never before has anyone got jurisdiction in a case against the Vatican in this country. And the Vatican is fighting it. I've been involved I met with his lawyer and I learned a lot. They're going to depose the Secretary of State, he told me. I'm not going to tell you the details of what's in here, but what I'm saying is this has to be at the very least dealt with. I know for a fact they've already offered him $7 or $8 million to pay the debt. I know that because I've seen the offer. I said, why don't you take it, Benjamin? He said, I don't want to give my children dirty money. Leave them dirty money. That's what he told me. So the rest of it, he's fighting right now. I've only confirmed a small part of this, but I know the oil companies he's alleging were involved. I've got the name of the corporations. I've got bank account numbers and locations. And it's just like when I uncovered all this other stuff. No one cares. Tell me where I'm wrong, Cardinal or Pope. Now, and I want to say this, one thing. Don't lose your faith. Stay with it. The faith, because the good Lord will take care of this sooner or later. Maybe he'll meet, you all came here for a reason. He might use you. But think about this. A cardinal gives our president, and somebody should pray for our president, help him find the faith, who's done more to promote abortion than anybody in this world. You're all here for a reason. Some of you know something or can do something.
So it's a good, I want to kind of wrap up on this, the idea of, you know, because you've gotten into it in depth, a lot of the terrible sin, corruption, criminal activity of clergy members. And you keep saying don't lose the faith, but how have you made all this work in your head? How have you been able to make it work in your heart to be able to continue to, come to Mass, call yourself a Catholic, say the creed, do all these things?
Because there's always one priest that has faith in you.
No. So you've got support from
Father John Harden came to me, who was there trying to make he needs to be a saint. And Father Harden came to me, Father Mascari, Father Switek. Father Peter Mascari got a hold of me. He was in Springfield after I started the newsletter. And years later, before he died, he put me in adoration every night, 2 o'clock Sunday morning at his parish. It was about an hour drive from me. But I keep my faith strong because I see the beauty in a family.
So we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up, actually. Yep. Stick around after and just chat with people individually.
I'll talk to whomever as late as you want, 3 in the morning.
Because we're gonna need to wrap up in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. Over there. Hold on. Wait till we get the microphone to you. Thanks.
I just wanted to know your website because I would like to help you.
rcf.org. RCF, Robert, Charlie, Francis, I'm not remembering the codes right, rcf.org. Or if you search Roman Catholic Faithful, you'll find it. And you can get you can download the documents I gave the Illinois Attorney General there. And I thank you, ma'am, very much. I don't get a payroll. We don't have office rent to pay. What money we take in when I'm not having to hire an attorney to cover me, it goes to my travel and my investigations. I get paid nothing, and I cover the phone, and I built an office above my wood shop at home. I married the farmer's daughter, so I got 400 acres to look out to watch all the roads.
So you got a question way back there.
Hi, thank you. My question is, this is where my dilemma comes in, because I know all these things are happening, watching church militant, Taylor Marshall and all that my husband likes to watch. I also believe in trusting in the Lord. I've been praying the Surrender Novena, and one of the days of the novena asks or tells you that you see evil growing, and he tells you not to worry and that he'll take care of it. And maybe it's through you and people like you that fight. So I applaud you because you're brave. I think many people wouldn't even try and do what you're doing. So thank you. But it's not really a question. I'm just saying that I think I understand how you keep your faith. And that's because we understand we're all humans, and the choices we're making is according to our free will. So I know I'm basically just answering a question that Father Saroki asked you. I believe that's how you keep your faith.
Well,
so
we got to pick up our cross and carry it.
I believe that, yes.
And I'll tell you something, don't take it the wrong way. I don't care what any of you think about me. Not one of you, but I love you all. And if I worried about public opinion, I couldn't do what I do, because I'm the loneliest man in the world at times. But then there's times I'm here, and I see some wonderful people that makes it worthwhile what I do. And it's just, I'm my Father's son, And it's just, with my father, when it comes to the family, if you didn't fear God, you'd better fear him. If you feared God, you wouldn't hurt the family. And if you don't fear God, you better fear him, because then you wouldn't hurt the family. So,
Go ahead. Okay, we'll get there in a second. Right, there's one over here.
Hi, I was wondering, back in 2002, the Supreme Court deemed it legal to portray child pornography within the adult industry as long as there were people 18 years or older doing it. Since you have so much respect for preserving the innocence of our children, and considering the success of overturning Roe v. Wade, can you see yourself advocating for that kind of thing to be overturned?
I'm glad you asked me that question. You know why? There used to be a decency code in this country up until the 1970s. No film would dare cross the Catholic faith. The Catholic Church used to be the moral guidepost. But you know why we have abortion and pornography? Because the bishops haven't done their job, period. It used to be the Kennedy family didn't want to cross the hierarchy, and the hierarchy did toe the line to some degree. I'm not accusing the Kennedy family of anything, but they were all involved in politics. Do you think Joe Biden, Pelosi, Durbin would do what they do if every cardinal, the Pope says, you're on the way to hell and you're taking your family with you, objectively speaking, if you don't clean up your act? What would this world do? Why do you think the devil attacks the Catholic Church so much? Because it has so much power. It is Christ's dominion. And so we have pornography. When your children reads about Father so-and-so doing so-and-so to whomever, what are they to think? Can they believe in anything? That's why it's destroying. But you're right, the pornography is a big part of the problem. I once got photographs from a rectory where the priest had stacks and stacks of homosexual pornography. I worked with the IRS on a case there. But it's the bishops. That's why we have to go after the people who claim to represent Christ and hold them accountable. Any profession in the world, a man can be a woman, you can be a donkey, you can be a parrot, whatever you want, get enough tattoos, but there's one vocation in life: you must be what you claim to be. And that's when you claim to represent Christ. And I'm sorry I get a little heated and passionate at this, but I believe it with all my heart. We wouldn't have these problems today if the bishops did their job, and I'm going to do what I can in my little bit of corner to do. You know, I shouldn't say this. I've done what nobody else has done. I brought a few bishops down, and so many people have come to me and made me feel so appreciated, and I'm nobody, I'm nothing. And so we have it because of the bishops and their inaction. Believe me, so I talk too much.
One more, over there.
Do you have insight why the Pope is requiring all bishops to transfer their assets to the Vatican Bank?
Well, it might have something to do with the same thing that a lot of parishes, the bishops are forming individual corporations in a lot of dioceses. I don't know what it's like here, but I know in Illinois they're making each parish an individual corporation.
Well, there's reasons for that. There's good reasons.
There's good reasons, bad, but it also hides assets. So why the Pope's doing that, I really couldn't tell you that, honestly, with any accuracy. So I have my ideas.
I have not heard of that at all. I have not heard of that. So
But there's billions of dollars floating around from you folks and folks like you. And, God only knows where it goes. I'm sure they're helping the poor with it somewhere, something, but I don't know.
Okay. I'm sorry. We're going to end it there. This was a very interesting conversation. I think this is something really important. So this is it's so painful, actually. It's very, very painful to even think about what's been happening. And a lot of people, and maybe everyone has a different role in this, but a lot of people say, we just have to pray and trust in God, and God will clean up the church. And I do pray for that. But then I also think, well, how is God going to clean up the church? Isn't it going to be through people, right? He's not going to just send lightning bolts and start striking down sinful priests and bishops, right? So it's one of those. And I'm not saying I have any answers on this. we pray for this, and so what would it look like? And it sounds like this is something that you heard very personally, this calling, where you couldn't just wait for someone else to do something.
Well, each step that I'm taking is a step closer and closer. I started out with sex education in the public schools, and now I'm getting information on allegations against money laundering and the billions of dollars with the Chinese. So the good Lord, and I hope and pray it's the good Lord, is taking me into a direction, to a level, it's unreal. I don't know how I got here. I have no idea. People say, how do you plan this? I don't. Seriously. Stuff comes to me, and then I'm my father's son, I deal with it.
I just want to encourage you, stay rooted. Hopefully you are. Stay rooted in prayer, in daily prayer. Always have some good counsel, because you have made yourself, this, a target and a lightning rod for all kinds of things. So I pray that God protects you, though, and that He guides you. And I just want to thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you, Father, for having me.
Let's thank Stephen Brady for spending his time here.
People say, aren't you afraid? I'm 70 years old. I've lived a long life. I'll fight as long as I can fight, and I'm not going to worry about